Boston Red Sox have found their man in Craig Breslow, but what happens now? Join me on today's episode of Locked On Red Sox, where I talk with a very familiar face about what the Red Sox should do from here.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast. And I am here with you Monday through Friday to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox for free to your favorite podcast platform. I mean, it's free, so you might as well tune in and continue to make the show your first listen of every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And this is the show where your emotions are the same as mine, and those emotions are felt on the show, whether they are good emotions or not so great emotions. I am here still bringing you that content, and the Red Sox during the 2023 season certainly filled me with many different types of emotions, and those emotions would change on a day-to-day basis. So you are here in the right spot. If you want a show that feels the same emotions as you. And I am so pleased to announce that I have a very familiar face with me on the show. For those of you who have listened to Locked On Red Sox for a long time and stuck with us over the years, I have former Locked On Red Sox host Lauren Campbell with me today. Lauren, how have you been doing?
I've been doing great, Gabby. I know we were talking before we started recording how it's like a full circle moment because you've been on when I was the host and now I'm on when you're the host, and we've collabed so much over the last few years, and I'm excited to come back and see some familiar faces, but get back on the familiar airwaves.
Yeah, right. It's so great to have you. And I know you've always been somebody that I've looked up to in the industry because you've really, done a lot of great work within Boston sports and really kind of made a name for yourself in the Boston sports scene. So definitely, love to watch you and your content, and just let us know a little bit about what you've been up to since hosting the show.
Yeah, thank you for your kind words. That's so sweet. But I've been working at MassLive for the last 5 or 6 months now. I basically went on a 2-week vacation in April with my husband, and I came back, and my former co-host Jake, we each got new jobs that weren't going to allow us to properly give Locked On Red Sox the time and attention. So we left on the same day, which was very not planned at all. But I've been at MassLive now, and I've just been kind of doing what I've been doing for the last 8 years, just reporting on stuff that's happening in Boston, what's happening nationally in the sports world. I've done a couple of feature stories this month, so I'm really excited about those. And I've been keeping track of the Red Sox like I've done my whole life. So was a very tough end to the season, and I say that in terms of it was tough to watch at times this year, and it was. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of questions still to be answered for 2024, but I'm always going to be looking forward to it. And this is a team I grew up watching, and now I grew up watching and loving, and now I report on them. So, and I'm still, putting out content pretty much like every day. It feels like, I mean, that's the life of a content creator and reporter, but it's been a lot of fun. I certainly miss hosting this every day, but you've been crushing it. And I know the show has been in good hands with you.
Thank you. I definitely appreciate that. Yeah, it's such an honor to host and interact with all different kinds of people and just share my thoughts and hear other people's thoughts too. It's just been a great experience, and I'm glad to hear that you're doing well and you're still very much covering the Red Sox and following the Red Sox, because there has been some news recently among Red Sox Nation. Yay, news, because it's been a little bit slow and we're having to watch these other teams make deep playoff runs, and the Red Sox were unfortunately just not one of those teams. So I've been sitting watching the postseason and waiting for the Red Sox to deliver something exciting to me. And now they have, they found their guy in Craig Breslow, who's going to take over baseball operations. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on him, what positive attributes he might be able to bring to the job?
I think the biggest thing is I think he's going to be really good for the pitching staff, and we still don't really know what that's going to look a whole lot like next year in terms of, who's the starters, who's going into the bullpen. Are you going to stick with Kenley as your closer? But I think he's going to get the best out of whoever is on that pitching staff, and I think that a lot of the problems last year were pitching, and it was whether it was injury, not being able to go deep into games, though we don't see starters go too deep anymore these days, but I think, there's a lot of not pessimism, but like maybe a lot of caution surrounding him because of lack of experience and how many people said no to the Red Sox job and how many people declined interviews. It was kind of alarming because at one point it was like 10 people have said no in the span of like a week or eight or 9 days or something. And it was like, what is going on? Like who doesn't want the front office Red Sox job? But I mean, you look at Dombrowski, he was fired about a year after he won the World Series. Chaim Bloom came in, did whatever he was told to do, and ended up getting fired, which I think still, I think that was the right move for the Red Sox. But you have to think about too, like you haven't won the World Series since 2018, which is not a very long time at all. You haven't been to the playoffs since 2021, which again, it's not a very long drought, but you think of just like there's definitely talent on this team. There's free agency. There's some money to be spent with the Red Sox and in this off season. But for Breslow, I think that he does come in a not. I don't want to say it's not ideal, because when you come in as somebody with the lack of experience that he has, you would hope, I guess, in his shoes, you can bring some people over that you're familiar with. You can bring in your own manager. You can bring in kind of your own staff. He doesn't get to do that. So I think there will be a time, acclimation, but I feel like Alex Cora is just a very personable person. He's easy to get along with. And, Breslow he's familiar with the game, familiar with Boston, obviously. So I think that gives him a bit of an advantage. And like I said, I think he's going to do really great for the pitching. I don't know how he's going to do, offensive wise and free agency, which is the biggest thing that's hanging over him right now, because there's a lot of names out there. There's a lot of decisions to be made. He's kind of getting thrown into the fire. I mean, you got to make a lot of decisions on what your team's going to look like next year. And you have all these players that are either impending free agents next year. You have a lot of players playing the same position. So it's a bit of a logjam in some positions. What do you do with the outfield? What do you do with your DH? So he's got his work cut out for him. I'm certainly looking forward to what he can do. And I think he'll be a nice change of pace from Chaim Bloom. I know that Red Sox fans did not like the patient approach because it didn't work the last 4 years. So I understand. I'm excited to see what he can do, but I think he's going to be the most beneficial when it comes to the pitchers.
Yeah, I definitely want to see some aggressiveness here, because with Chaim Bloom, I found that he might have been a little too cautious and overthought some of the moves that he was making, and it really hurt the Red Sox because they would miss out on some of the bigger names that they could have ended up with. And ultimately, to me, this past trade deadline, I feel, is kind of what did him in from an ownership standpoint and his lack of making some moves. And it was definitely a little disappointing because at that point, the Red Sox were not far off of a wild card spot. And it was almost like, well, if you're going to stand pat at the trade deadline, what message is that really sending to the team? And, it sounded like, from what I was hearing and kind of what I heard, that it just wasn't taken well by the team. And it can be discouraging to them. Like, do you not really believe in us to make a playoff run? I know there were specific players like Kenley Jansen, Justin Turner, expressing that they wanted the Red Sox to add pitching at the trade deadline, and they didn't. And then as a result, we saw a lot of the pitching staff get overworked towards the end of the season. So I really hope that, like you said, Breslow can excel from a pitching standpoint, because that is the biggest need for the Red Sox right now, is improving that pitching staff and really getting 2 top-end starters to add to that rotation.
Yeah, I think I think you nailed it when you said there was a lot of, lack of decision-making, and then it becomes where is the direction of this team? And that was the biggest question going into last season, or this current season, saying what direction is the team going to go? And at the trade deadline, they were still in the race. There was still kind of hope. And it was just like 2022. They give you a little bit of hope at the deadline. They don't do a whole lot at the deadline. And then they just kind of fall off. And it's like a slow fall. Like they just can't, they're not even close in games sometimes. And then other times they're like, we're going to win 10-1. Or it's like, we're going to be up 10-0 and then lose 11-10. And it's like, this team is so infuriating sometimes. But I think that Breslow needs to come in. He needs to not be afraid to make decisions and not be afraid to be like, this is what this team needs. And this is what I'm going after. And this is what needs to be done to get fans back at Fenway Park, put a better product on the field, especially if they're going to keep raising ticket prices. You need to put a better product on that ball field. And, you mentioned, players expressing disdain, I guess is a good word to say about the lack of moves at the deadline. It's like if the players are telling you what needs to be done, like listen to them. They're the ones playing. They're the ones who are seeing desperately what this team needs. And I would love to see them go out and get 1 or 2 starters as well. I think that if Brayan Bello can continue to build and he looked really, really good at times last year. Big question mark, Chris Sale and his health, and if he can not necessarily return to even, Chris Sale from 2018, but if he can just be a little bit of that, if he can stay healthy and give you, 5 or 6 innings, I think that's a win. But I don't think he's a number 1 anymore. I think Brayan Bello has the potential to be there, but I think you bring in somebody who is a 1 and then maybe a really strong 3 or 4. There's a lot of options that you have, but they definitely need help in that starting pitching department. I don't know how many people they started last year or how many players pitched or pitchers pitched last year. It was a lot. It was a merry-go-round, and it was almost like nobody could be trusted because they were overworked and they were pitching on short rest. It was a lot last year watching this pitching staff try to do its best and just kind of crumble. And same with the offense too. I mean, at times it's like, what are they doing? Swinging at the first pitch every single time they have an opportunity to extend the inning or to score. And I just feel like toward the end of that season, the season that players not necessarily gave up, but they were just like, we're tired. There's no way we're getting back in this. We're not even we're fighting with the Yankees for last place. Like, what is there to fight for in 2023 anymore?
Yeah, it was blatantly obvious to me that they were really just going through the motions at the end of the season, not playing with any heart, and we're just counting down the days to the off season at that point. And unfortunately, injuries hurt this team in 2023, but because of those injuries, that's what made adding some pitching that much more important. So I'm hoping Breslow can switch the narrative for that and actually go out and invest in some top end talent from a pitching standpoint. Otherwise, they're just going to get swallowed up again in what is a really competitive AL in general, but especially AL East. This division is just stacked. So they need to get pitching that will allow them to contend within their own division again. But coming up, we're going to be discussing some of those expectations for 2024. How can the Red Sox really be competitive moving forward? So that's coming up next. This is a great time of year to get yourself into sports betting if you haven't really gotten involved in it yet, or if you are involved in it and you want to continue to make a lot of money. FanDuel is the best sports betting app for that. One of the biggest things I like about it is my fiance is so into sports betting now, and he's very new to it. But I see him on the app all the time, placing his bets for that day, and you can really extend it across multiple sports, and you can make a bet on the World Series that night, or NBA, who's going to win those games that night, or you can say, Luka's going to drop 20 plus points tonight, or Jaylen Brown is going to record 20 points, and you can have that for multiple players or multiple games across different sports. So you can almost have a few different bets going on at once, and you won't always necessarily hit on all of them, but you might hit on 2 of 3, which is what happened to him the other night. And then you still are making that money on it. So FanDuel gives you a lot of options to win lots of money. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. I love it. My fiance would say the same thing. He's won a lot of money on it. So you should totally look into it if you haven't yet. And what you should also be doing is downloading the SiriusXM app, because that can get you the home broadcast of every Red Sox game. So you don't have to miss a single pitch. And honestly, it might have been better to miss some pitches in some games in 2023 because of just how stressed and frustrated we all were. But I'm hoping that frustration turns to excitement over what will hopefully be a much better 2024 season. So download the SiriusXM app and get in on all that action so you don't have to miss any games, even when you're not home and can't watch the game. So it's a great luxury to have. So do that today as well. Speaking of the 2024 season, Red Sox fans are hard to please. And we are hoping for just some big splashes this offseason and a better 2024 season than we had in 2023. I am here with Lauren Campbell, former host of the Locked On Red Sox podcast. And I would love to talk to you, Lauren, more about what are your expectations for 2024? Where do you think that this team should be at compared to what they showed in 2023?
They certainly need to do a 180. They need to completely, we talked a little bit about it in the first segment, but go get some starting pitching. I think you kind of need to overhaul that starting pitching staff. You really need a right-handed bat as well. And I don't know if we can say enough about the defense. That needs to be fixed. Like that needs to be, they should be working on that right now. They should be figuring out how to not make the mental errors, the small errors, and just like the errors that should not be made at the major league level constantly. So of course, that's always going to happen. There's always going to be errors. That's like, that was avoidable. There was so many last year. And, I think that they really need to work with Rafael Devers, whether that it's a confidence thing with him right now, whether this is, this is who he is at third base and as a defender. I think that he needs to really bounce back defensive wise for 2024. And they really need a clubhouse leader. And I think that's a priority. Justin Turner was great last year. And who knows if he's going to be brought back. That's another question mark they have to figure out. But they didn't really have, aside from him, they didn't really have a ton of leadership in that clubhouse. And yes, you can look at this as Rafael Devers' team. He's not like a big vocal leader. I think he's a very emotional guy. We see him, go with those emotions. We see him with his head in his hands. We see him sitting at third base, like, what the heck is going on? So, but I think that, if he has somebody, like, I think he really misses Xander Bogaerts. I think he really misses JD Martinez, who we could kind of lean on to rally this team. And maybe people can make the argument that it should be Devers, and maybe it should be, he's their big offseason signing last year. He's been around for a while, but sometimes you look at the leadership core of teams, there's always going to be somebody who's the vocal leader, who's that rah-rah guy, who's going to get you amped up and get you motivated. And then there's going to be the guy who kind of leads by emotion, kind of leads quietly, but they really need somebody, like that rah-rah guy that's going to hold you accountable, that's going to tell you, like, what we're doing on the field right now is not acceptable. And they need somebody to just kind of have their backs when they need it, but also kind of give them a little shove when they need that too. Like, we're better than this. We're the Boston Red Sox. And I mean, it's easier for us to sit here and say, like, that's what needs to be done. And now it's just a matter of, will the front office go out and execute that? I mean, that's a whole nother episode.
Yeah, right. I mean, that becomes the question is, how do the Red Sox really get back to being one of the most well-respected teams and organizations in baseball? And obviously it's disheartening that there were people that were turning down that opportunity to come in and resume that role of taking over the baseball operations side of things because it's the Boston Red Sox. And it used to be just a dream organization for people to work for because of how reputable of an organization the Red Sox are. But there really just has been a lot of front office turnover over these years. And to see the way that they've treated past executives, people are probably looking at that and saying, well, I'm going to come in to that role and do what they want me to do for a few years, and then they're going to let me go. Why would I be excited to have that type of job? For any job, it'd be like that. If I was looking at a position and there was a lot of turnover in that position, then I'd be like, well, why is that? And what makes me feel like I'm going to be the one that sticks? So they need to, now that they have Breslow in there, hang on to him and give him a genuine opportunity to really build this organization back into what the Boston Red Sox are about. And I think there's some great talent in the farm system now. I think Bloom did a good job of identifying and acquiring some of that young talent that they can develop in their system. But now they have to be willing to start to part ways with some of those guys, because that's going to be one of the things that's going to get them the players they need. I think they should focus their attention on free agency first and be willing to spend money on some of those players that could help fill some of those holes, especially from a pitching standpoint. But if they're going to look into the trade market, I feel that they can't be too afraid to part ways with some of those more talented prospects that are in their system, because I think the mentality over the last few years was to do what they can to retain those guys. So it didn't allow them to acquire some of those bigger name proven veteran players that can help put your team over the top.
Yeah, they really need to be aggressive, both, like you said, in free agency and on the trade market, if that's the direction they want to go. I think with that, they really, really need to decide where some of these prospects fit into their system, onto their team. Are they the future? Do they really believe Marcelo Meyer is their shortstop of the future? If that's what they truly believe and they believe he will make this team better for years to come, absolutely keep him. But if you don't think that, if you think, oh, he's been injured a few times now, maybe this is just, he's going to build up injuries over his career, he's not going to be sturdy, he's not going to be reliable, okay, then maybe get on the phone and see what someone like him could acquire. But you have to be 100% confident in either direction. I think they end up keeping him. And then, but there's also, you have Brian Mata, was supposed to be part of the Red Sox last year, but unfortunately due to injury, that didn't happen. He's another one. Is he going to be a part of this team? Is he going to help this team? And is he going to make this team better? And there's several other prospects. I mean, there's Ceddanne Rafaela as well. I don't think they get rid of him, but you look like that's somebody who could probably make your team better, whether that's next year or at some point next year or in 2025. So the aggressiveness needs to be there, whether that's the free agent market, the trade market, and they can't be afraid. They can't be afraid to part ways with whether it's top prospects, even middle tier prospects. And I think there are some prospects out there that are still, you don't know what you have yet because they're still developing, they're still young. But when somebody, Marcelo Meyer, he's knocking on the door of MLB now. I think that he's much closer than he was last year, but now it's going to become, what do you do with him? You don't just want to hold on to him to trade him when he doesn't have as much value as he does but that he might have now or when the season starts. But I really think free agency is where they're going to do, hopefully, a lot of work. And I think they can do a lot of damage in free agency. They just have to be aggressive, which they have not been the last few years.
Exactly. And, you mentioned Marcelo Meyer, who likely is going to be MLB ready soon. I mean, he's just killing it in the organization, and he's just so fun to follow because he's going to be one of those players that I think every Red Sox fan is going to be so excited when he comes up. So because of that, knowing that he's just lurking and almost ready to come up to the majors, how do you think they handle the infield situation this offseason? Because there is a question mark at second base right now. And obviously Trevor Story is still there and is currently playing shortstop. But knowing Meyer will likely come up at some point, probably in the next couple of years, with Story still being there, do you think that they just have somebody internally play second base right now and they kind of view it as a placeholder position and then they maybe move Story back to second base towards the end of his contract when Meyer comes up? Or do you think they go and they sign a second baseman this offseason?
I would love to see them sign a second baseman because we saw the internal options last year, and it was just whether it was injury, whether it just wasn't somebody who doesn't play second, somebody who hasn't had a lot of MLB time at second or MLB time period. We saw a revolving door there. And Christian Arroyo, he did have a lot of injuries, a lot of injury history, struggled to stay healthy, was never really an everyday player. And then they get rid of him. And I was like, that he gave you the best shot at being a better second baseman than a lot of players have. I'm not saying bring Christian Arroyo back. I'm saying they shouldn't have done what they did to him last year. But I would love to see them get someone at second base. I mean, I would love for Story to move to second because we saw how good he was there. And we saw that, when Xander Bogaerts was still here, we saw what he can do. And I think he's a fine shortstop. Obviously, that's what he's played his whole career. And then that leaves a hole there. We know what happened when they didn't replace Bogaerts and Story had to have a surgery. It was a mess. So they really need stability in the infield. I think Costas obviously is going to be fine. Devers, I mean, that's a question mark, but I don't think they're going to be searching for anyone at third. But that middle infield is a question mark because where will Story start? Where will he ultimately end up? Will he stay healthy? And you certainly don't want to rush Meyer. We've seen prospects get rushed so many times, not just with the Red Sox, but through MLB, and they don't live up to the hype or they take a little longer to get acclimated with everything. And you don't want to do that to any of their prospects that they have. So I think second base certainly needs to be addressed. I don't want to see internal options because we saw that last year and it just did not work out in their favor. But I don't even know. I couldn't sit here and be like, oh, I could tell you who I want at second just because it's like, that was like so far down on my list where it's like, oh yeah, they still need to figure out that infield.
Yeah, right. And I mean, when Story came back, that certainly helped the infield tremendously from a defensive standpoint. Obviously, you mentioned it before, defense was one of the biggest issues with this team in 2023, and that absolutely needs to be fixed. But after his surgery, his arm, I thought, looked great, and he really made a difference defensively. It's really too bad he couldn't figure it out at the plate when he came back. But defensively, he was definitely a positive attribute to this team. So it would be interesting to me to see if they decide they want to keep him at shortstop for now or move him to second base and then try to bring somebody else in. But I'd rather keep him at shortstop for now and sign somebody to play second base than trying to experiment with the shortstop thing again, because I don't want to relive what we did in 2023. Poor Kike. And it's just, it was such an experience and just too many inconsistencies and too many people cycling through. And stability is a good word for it. We just can't have that anymore. They need to find somebody and lock somebody in and just really round out that middle infield so that they can feel confident with what they have in 2024. But next, I'm going to be asking you about a couple players who are question marks to return in 2024, but absolutely were great assets to the Boston Red Sox in 2023. As we're talking about prospects, though, don't forget to check out Locked On MLB Prospects, where you can get great insight into how the prospects are doing. I actually saw today they dropped an episode discussing Red Sox prospects and who's going to fit into the organization long term, who might be somebody who they could potentially move. So as a Red Sox fan, it could be a great episode and show for you to check out. Locked On is also great and has a variety of different shows on the network. You can check out Locked On Patriots, Locked On Celtics, or Locked On Bruins. If you are a big all-around Boston fan like myself, there's some great hosts on here who can give you insight into what's going on with those teams, especially because they're all in season right now. And the Celtics and Bruins are definitely teams to be excited about if you're a Boston fan, which is a nice change from being a Red Sox fan and a Patriots fan this season. Hopefully there's some optimism with those teams. So check out those shows as well. Don't forget, you can get Locked On Red Sox for free every day on your favorite podcast platform. I am here and you should be too. Continue making it your first listen of every day and download the SiriusXM app so you can get the Red Sox home broadcast of every game so you don't have to miss a single pitch. And I mean, honestly, we're all adults here. We have real adult responsibilities. Sometimes we don't have time to sit and watch the game start to finish, but you can listen to it. And if you're traveling, it's a great resource. I've done it before this past summer, traveling for baseball trips with my fiance, and we would be on the road for a while, and the Red Sox helped me pass time. So definitely utilize that to your advantage. Continue to follow the show and follow me on Twitter at Gabby Hurlbut10, where we can continue the discussion there of all things Red Sox. I thoroughly enjoy hearing from you. So check that out as well. But Lauren, there are a couple players who are question marks to return in 2024 for the Boston Red Sox that really made a positive contribution in 2023. One of them is somebody you mentioned earlier in Justin Turner. He was the heart of that clubhouse. He was a great veteran to have around some of these younger players. But his future is uncertain right now. And he did say that at the end of the season. I think he enjoyed playing in Boston. He and his wife really embraced everything that comes with playing in Boston. Do you think realistically that he comes back next year?
I think there's a path for him to return. I don't see it happening. And I love Justin Turner. I thought he was great for this team, and he was that bright spot. And he's still in Boston. He was candlepin bowling the other day in Boston, so he hasn't left. And I think, like you said, him and his wife Courtney have really embraced the city. And I think that the path is, it's obviously a cheaper 1-year extension. And if they want him to strictly be DH, which he was supposed to last year until the mess that started happening in the infield, and he was also injured. He had the heel bruise that was really, really bothering him, but he played through it. So I think there is a path. I don't know. I don't think the Red Sox want to. I don't think that he's a priority, is what I'm trying to say. I think that maybe they'll stay away, and if he's still available when they're kind of ready to fill out the roster, they'll bring him in. But it's kind of, then it becomes a thing. Is he your everyday DH? What if, I don't think this will happen, but people, threw the idea out there that Yoshida could be a DH, when it's like, you're not going to pay him all this money after his first year in Major League Baseball just to DH him in year 2. So, but there are, there's a lot of questions, and he could, if you want him to be a stopgap, sure. The price has to be right. I don't think he's looking for anything long-term, but realistically, yes, he could return. Do I think it happens? Unfortunately, no.
Yeah. I mean, I love what Justin Turner did for this team. And obviously the season he had baseball wise was one of his best of his career too. And he was Mr. Clutch, is what I always like to call him, because he was that guy you wanted at the plate when the Red Sox had runners on and you needed somebody to come through with a big hit to score some runs. A lot of the times Justin Turner was that guy who could drive in those runs for you. And I think he really was just very well respected and loved among the clubhouse and even among the fans. So I'd like to see him come back, but like you said, I think there's other priorities, and Yoshida is just a piece of the puzzle to the outfield situation right now, because there are some things they need to figure out there. They have quite a few people who could fill starting spots in that outfield, but the question becomes who. And Adam Duvall was a big piece of that outfield when he was healthy. I mean, he really was raking at the plate and was one of their best offensive players. And we also obviously know that he can play defensively pretty well too. Do you think that they try to bring him back maybe on a short-term deal again, or do you think that they just move on from him because they already have a crowded enough outfield situation as it is?
Yeah, I think that the Adam Duvall Red Sox marriage is going to come to an end. I think that his priority in the offseason will be joining a contender, I think. And he said recently that he doesn't know how much more baseball he has left. He doesn't know how many more years are ahead of him. And you want to spend your final years trying to win a World Series. You want to spend every year trying to win the World Series. But when you are toward the end of your career and joining the Red Sox, you're hoping that it's going to have a different outcome than 2023, and it doesn't. So I think that he's going to look for somewhere that's serious about contending, that are already, maybe they already are in contention this year and they'll continue to be next year. And you said it, the outfield is very crowded. You have Jarren Duran out there, who really turned his season around before he got hurt. Really looks like an everyday player. Alex Verdugo is still under control for another year as well. And then I know there's been talk about him, what's going to happen with him, but I feel like Rafaela is going to be your center fielder of the future. There's also Abreu, and he looked really good last year at times, and he could be one of the corner outfielders at times too. And then there's Yoshida. So it's still very crowded, even if you don't bring back Duvall. But having options is a good thing. Having too many is going to create not a lot of opportunity for players who deserve opportunity. So I think that once his contract officially expires, that he'll go to a contender. And I hope he does. I really liked what he did. He was great when he was healthy, and he started the season off so hot and was such a bright spot before the wrist injury. And he was a competitor. He still competed every day, even when the Red Sox seemed like there was no life in them. So he brings a lot of good things to a team. But I think with his age and just wanting to start winning playoff games, a World Series, I think the Red Sox will have interest, but I think he'll go elsewhere.
Yeah, and I don't blame him. I mean, he deserves to be on a team that genuinely can make a World Series run, and the Red Sox can get there, but whether that's in 2024, they need to hit on everything in order for that to happen. I really like Duvall too. When they signed him, I liked the signing, but didn't think he was going to make as much of an impact as he really did. So he ended up just really having a good season in Boston. It's too bad that he wasn't healthy for the whole season, because I would have loved a full healthy season of Duvall. But the outfield situation definitely is something they need to figure out. I'm excited about Abreu. I hope that he sticks around, because he definitely made his mark in that short stint that he did play, and was really making things happen offensively. So I really am interested in seeing kind of how much they value that and his talent level. But that's another thing for Breslow to figure out. He's certainly in a tough spot here, taking on this position, and he's very brave for doing so, because it's a tough spot to be in, and there's a lot of pressure on him right now, and fans are putting a lot of pressure on him. So we'll see. Hopefully he can embrace the role and make the right moves to make us excited for 2024. But Lauren, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here with me. It was so nice having that familiar voice and familiar face back on here for the Locked On Red Sox listeners, and I truly appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was great to be back, and hopefully we can connect again and over some good news and over some exciting news and get ready for 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the season will be here before we know it. The offseason always flies by. So we'll see what they do. Hopefully they make the most of it. But as always, just try to keep the faith and get yourself excited for 2024. It's a new chapter. Let's go Red Sox, and I will catch you next time.